cars are funny things for many reasons, often because it's the smallest of details which make them a dream car. And that's exactly what I'm driving today, because this is not just a 1999 Nissan Skyline R34 GT-R V-Spec, but it's a GT-R V-Spec in Bayside blue. And tell me now if that makes a big difference or not, because for me, it really does. I'm going to enjoy this one. In the 80s and 90s, Japan gifted the world with an incredible selection of performance cars, so many that a lot of them are today often forgotten, even by us petrol heads. However, get a bunch of people together, ask them what their favourite Japanese car is, and often you get one of only a few answers. A Toyota Supra, a Honda NSX, a Mazda RX-7, or this, for some, the daddy, the Nissan Skyline GT-R. There were 3 generations of car to wear the iconic Skyline GT-R badge that are most fondly remembered. There was the original, the one and only Godzilla, the mighty R32. Yes, I know, not the first car to wear either the Skyline or GT-R badges, but as far as many are concerned, that really was the beginning of its modern performance legacy. Then, the generally unloved R33, which in recent years has seen something of a renaissance, and I'm very glad about that because it's a car I actually kinda like. Then, in 1999, we got this, the R34, the rarest of the trio, the most technologically advanced, and the final Skyline GT-R, because its successor, the R35, did not wear the Skyline badge, being simply a GT-R. I believe these were the first generation to actually be sold officially in the UK, though never sold really in great quantities that way. Many of them instead came here as grey imports, because that was a very common thing back in the 90s, thanks to an extremely favourable exchange rate. Whilst it was a fine performer in its own right, this car has carved out a very different legend to that of the earlier R32. That car made its name in racing, where it absolutely dominated the scene in a couple of places, most notably Australia and Japan. But the fame of the R34 was instead found through the medium of media, in video games like Gran Turismo and in films like The Fast and the Furious, or more accurately, Too Fast, Too Furious, because in that film we are introduced to Paul Walker's R34 Skyline. That car is particularly significant because it would have been genuinely exotic to American audiences. The R34, 33 and 32 as well in fact, having never been officially brought to the United States. It's only now that they're actually beginning to make their way over, and that is one reason why prices of these are going only one direction. A decade or so ago, and a decent Skyline R34 GT-R would have set you back £20,000–30,000. In fact, even 6 years ago, I remember considering buying one of these when I was starting the channel, and there were plenty of decent, unmodified examples available for sort of 35 to 40 grand. One of the iconic Mines examples was also out there, and that was only £65,000. Today, the very same car would easily command triple or quadruple that money. As it happens, one of the very reasons I didn't buy those cars was because at the time, none of them came up in Bayside blue. And I can't remember exactly why it is that this colour is so associated with this car for me, but it is. There is no way I'd own an R34 Skyline without it being Bayside blue. To the extent that when my friend George was selling his R34, that I've previously reviewed on the channel, it was more or less the fact that it was black that put me off buying it, because then it's just another old Japanese car and not my JayEmm dream machine. Today's car differs in a number of ways. As mentioned, this is a V-Spec, and that means a few things. To put this into context for my German car fans, think of this as the Skyline S. As this was still the era of the Japanese gentleman's agreement, no Skyline was ever advertised as having more than 280 PS, 276 brake horsepower, though it was well known by the time these were being made, they likely made closer to 330. The torque figure, likewise, you can take with a pinch of salt, and that's around the 290 pound-foot mark, around 400 Newton meters or so. This car is generally unmodified, which you may find hard to believe from the white wheels, the big spoiler, and the loud exhaust. However, that loud exhaust is a Tomei titanium item that is essentially a catback, so in performance terms, it does nothing. It's actually slowing me down a little bit today because it hangs a bit too low, and that means it catches the deck quite easily. In fact, on one of the drive-bys we shot earlier, it produced a rather spectacular shower of sparks. Nothing that I can really do anything about, and this car's kind owner, Anthony, is very happy for me to carry on regardless. The white wheels are official Nissan items but put on by somebody in Japan. Likewise, that rear spoiler. It is the original wing, but simply sits on slightly higher than standard carbon legs. There is also a Nismo intercooler, but otherwise this car is exactly as it left the factory 23 years ago. V-Spec stands for Victory Specification, so over the regular GT-R you did not get any more power, but you did get a slightly more advanced version of the Atessa all-wheel drive system. You also got an active limited slip differential at the rear rather than a plain mechanical one. The V-Spec also brings slightly lower, stiffer suspension. Later, a V-Spec 2 was introduced that had a carbon fibre bonnet, even stiffer suspension, and I believe a couple of other changes too. The M-Spec that I drove was based on the V-Spec 2 and is essentially one of those, but with an aluminium bonnet like this rather than the carbon one, and special ripple control dampers to make the car a little bit more comfortable. So then, for all intents and purposes, this is an unmodified Skyline R34 GT-R. Nothing that's been done to this car should affect the way that it drives. Time then to answer the question, is it actually that good? .76 horsepower, my backside. This thing is absolutely magnificent. A real proper treat. Oh, it's so good. Where do I even begin? In fact, if you're not a Japanese car person, let me try and explain what makes this so special. I'm sure many people will look at a car like this and go, ugh, horrible, nasty, boxy thing. Truth be told, if you took the wing off the back, this is a pretty unremarkable looking two-door coupe. There's nothing really all that special about it. Add the wing though, lower it, as Nissan have, and it does take on an edge of aggression. The square nature of the design also means you can place it very easily. By modern standards, it's quite a narrow thing, and so is remarkably well suited to British roads. If in terms of dimensions, not maybe ride comfort, this is a fairly stiff car, but not actually unpleasantly so. I was expecting it to be a little worse. The RB26 engine is also nothing short of an absolute masterpiece. It's brilliant. I've driven it in modified guise, but never in standard form. A lot of people I know like to chase fairly big power figures from these, and the guy who has the R32, Mark, has now modified his with a single turbo, so it makes 600 horsepower, and he thinks the car is even better than ever before. The offer is open to me to revisit that car, so I'll certainly be taking them up on that and seeing whether you can improve those cars with one gigantic snail. But what I love about this car is the fact that it feels naturally aspirated. You wouldn't really think there are turbos there other than the fact that it pulls rather well from fairly low down. The speedo has been calibrated so that 0 to 3000 RPM are all compressed. That tells you the engine wants about 3000 RPM behind it, and when it's got that, it's fantastic. There's just a moment of turbo lag, but the engine responds beautifully, very linearly, and it's progressive, making power all the way to the 8000 RPM red line. That surprised me. I did think, this being a standard car, that it would perhaps struggle a little bit at the top reaches of the rev range or feel a little bit held back. It doesn't. In fact, if you told me this was also making about 400 horsepower, I would believe you. The gearbox is also fantastic. Not quite as brilliant as the 5-speeder in the R32 and 33, but this is very, very nice. The pedals are also set up so well that even in my slightly larger trainers, I can still heel and toe with relative ease. And then we get onto the steering. Oh, it's so good. I remember when I drove the trio together that it was the R32 that really stood out in terms of its steering, amongst other things. However, this is still no slouch, and in isolation it's hard to use any word beyond brilliant to describe how this car feels. The wheel looks to me to have been retrimmed, but otherwise is standard, and it's perfection. It's the right size of rim, the right thickness of covering, and you get so much feedback from this thing. It's incredible. Really, really special. No, maybe it's not quite as hyperactive and detailed as something like a 964 RS, but in any normal company, this is brilliant. Of course, the Achilles heel of these cars is, and has always been, their interiors. There's no other way of describing them than terrible. They are cheap 1990s Japanese car. The facelift version of these cars did fix a few things, but still, they're not exactly spectacular. This is very basic, fairly plain feeling, and not really any more special a place to be in than, say, my Toyota Celica. Yes, American fans, that is how we say it. I've never, ever heard anybody in Britain call it a Celica, and I concede, on that one, you're probably right. And that car can get away with its low rent interior, because when I bought it, I parted with about 8 grand, and even today, the very finest of GT4s would set you back maybe 20. However, 20,000 quid would more or less get you laughed out of anywhere selling a Skyline GT-R. Doesn't really matter which variant it is. For that money, I suppose you might be able to get one of the less desirable GTST or GTTs or whatever they call them variants, but the GT-R, not a chance. In fact, when I checked this morning, there wasn't an example on sale that didn't have a price tag with 6 figures. At this point in time, a more accurate price for a car like this is close to £150,000. This car is so good to carve through a bit of road like that. It comes alive, it talks to you, it eggs you on. It's really, really good. If you're the sort of person that doesn't give 2 hoots about one of these, you think there's nothing worse, and you wouldn't even give one a second chance, if you get the opportunity to drive a Skyline GT-R, take it. Please take it. If you are a petrol head, your eyes will be opened. These are incredible machines. They really are. And trust me, I wish they weren't. I wish I could tell you, no, this is absolutely awful. Anthony is a madman for having spent so much of his money on this old Japanese thing that should be worth about 1,500 quid. No, it's brilliant. properly brilliant. He's owned this now for about a year. He had it imported via Torque GT, who I like quite a bit, and if you're looking for a Japanese car or Japanese car performance parts, please do give them a shout and tell them I sent you, because they're lovely people. The one thought going through my head currently is that when they built this, they absolutely knew, and the proof is everywhere if you know where to look for it, that they wanted people to give these more power. With what it's got now, the all-wheel drive system really is just sat there going, if you need me, give me a shout, otherwise I'll be in the shed having a kip. It's totally unnecessary, but when you've got 500 horsepower, you'll be thankful for it. These also have rear-wheel steer, the fabled and sometimes dreaded high-cast system. I believe this still has it in play. It does give the cars a little bit of extra agility, though in the earlier Skylines it was notorious for being, well, lethal, to be honest. These even have a pretty decent sized boot, and you can get 4 adults in them. So if you are committed enough to buy one, you'll be happy to know you can actually use it, take it places, and enjoy it in more or less all the ways you can pretty much any car. Before we finish, I do also want to say a little bit about this car's owner, Anthony. Lovely chap. Like many, he emailed me one day and said, James, I've got this car, would you like to drive it? Truth be told, even if it wasn't Bayside Blue, I would have said yes, because I was relishing the opportunity to sample one of these cars on its own without others to compare to, on roads I know slightly better than last time. And I have to say, the car has not disappointed. But what really interested me about Anthony is that he is a fellow YouTuber, but not a car one. He in fact has a channel, much bigger than mine I should point out, about Minecraft. He's done very well, and this car was a treat to himself. As it happens, he's been a fan of my channel for a few years now, and I was one of the reasons he bought the previous car he owned, an R35. He had that, did enjoy it, but saw prices of these going ever north and thought, you know what, the R35 is lovely, but this is the dream. And this is the power of cars. First off, sometimes newer, faster, better put together doesn't equal better, certainly not in the minds of the petrol head. But more importantly than that, I think there are probably a lot of people out there who would look at somebody like Anthony and go, oof, there's a young lad, sits in his bedroom, plays video games, makes videos, makes loads of money, no interest in cars whatsoever, like, great. And it would be very, very easy to be dismissive of people like him. However, to do so would be to make a grave mistake, because the world is changing. People like him are becoming increasingly common and increasingly popular. And it is genuinely heartwarming for me to know and see that there are people like him who's kind of my age, that grew up with Gran Turismo, have now found fame and fortune in the cut and thrust world of social media. And although it may not be obvious to their followers that they are car people, they are car people. And so if they want to buy stuff like this, use it and enjoy it as he does, I think we should really be celebrating that. Perhaps in the next 10 to 20 years, people are going to be a lot more interested in what cars YouTubers are driving rather than footballers. So my thought for the day is perhaps if you're watching YouTubers that don't do cars, maybe comment and ask them what they drive or if they're into cars, because maybe you'll find a few out there who have a shared interest with you that you didn't realise. This is a part of my personal crusade to promote the car as a tool for social good, a way of bringing people together rather than dividing them. If we can find more people out there who just love cars, let's not worry too much about what kind of cars they love, just make sure that they do, and as long as there are young people out there looking at stuff like this, the rest of us are going to be safe for a while. And I have to say, annoying as it is, this is a fabulous car. In fact, if a few of you watch this video and more like it, for some reason Japanese stuff on my channel never really does that well, maybe I will be able to get my own. Although the one thing I will say is that a lot of people are currently believing these are going to keep going up and up and up in value, something that will never stop. This is not true. Every car has its limit, and more to the point, people in America are not really going to be buying them from Britain. They're going to get them from Japan or somewhere else that doesn't put salt on the roads. In any case, if you can find one of these, you can afford it, and you're thinking about it, do it. You're not going to regret it. So, a huge thanks to Anthony for bringing his car out, sharing another one of his passions. To you for watching, don't forget to like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.